It all begins when Ferda's engagement to Archduchess Valdrova is officially decided. His father tells him that he is absolutely certain the young man knows exactly what this implies. Hearing this, the MC is completely devastated. For him to react like that, I bet she must be a real sight for sore eyes, and not in a good way. For a nobleman, those words were basically a permanent farewell sentence, leaving him with only two possible paths. He could either refuse and get kicked out of the family, or accept and end up completely torn to shreds. Still, all the young man ever truly wanted was to be accepted and finally belong to that family. As a sickly, illegitimate third son, he would practice his training while the servants constantly mocked him as pathetic and untalented. No one ever stood by his side, yet he pushed through every bit of that harsh rejection Ferda kept putting in the effort, trying his absolute best day in and day out. He did all of this simply hoping to get a single look of approval from his father. He genuinely believed that one day he would finally be recognized by everyone around him. That is, until one of his brothers shows up to mock him, asking if he has completely lost his mind for taking up night training. He gets severely beaten and is told that he never even had the right to try something like that. The bully humiliates him further, calling him a filthy, blue-eyed outcast. He just wanted to be embraced as a real part of that family. But the truth of the matter was that things were never going to be that simple. In that exact moment, Ferda realized that everyone there had turned their backs on him a very long time ago. Realizing this, he makes up his mind and tells his father that he is leaving the family for good. His father just stares back at him with a freezing glare, showing absolutely no emotion or regret whatsoever. The man simply accepts it and sends him away, slamming the massive mansion gates shut behind him. He is strictly warned that from that moment on, he is no longer considered a Roznova. With a trembling hand, he laments how his father knew about all his hard work and still threw him away like trash. An overwhelming rage consumes the young man, completely transforming the look in his eyes. He swears to himself that he will never, ever forgive his father for what he did. Right at that split second, a glowing red magic circle appears directly in front of him. Determined to make them all regret it, Ferda awakens as a mage that very same day. He managed to unlock his magical powers at just 18 years old. Others mock him, claiming it is way too late to start trying to be a mage at his age. They ask if he even has the brains to understand magic, arguing it would take him decades just to grasp the bare basics. Ferda does not care about any of that, and releases a massive surge of mana that completely terrifies everyone. A crimson circle emerges, because his mana feeds purely on his hatred and intense desire for payback. A massive explosion of power happens right in front of the other students. Ferda realizes that the more he despises someone, the stronger he becomes. Oh, nice. A classic payback story just the way I like it. After reaching the sixth circle through his quest for payback, the only thing left to do was return to his former home. He goes back and coldly forces the servants who used to mock him to completely end themselves. Next, Ferda makes his two older brothers turn on each other with absolute hatred. The bitter animosity between the brothers continues, until they both end up completely destroying one another. Finally, he confronts his father, the man he despised the most, who is now down on his knees begging for an end to it all. While his father begs for the final blow, Ferda forces him to take a good look at the total ruin of the family he built. The man's mind completely breaks down as he witnesses total devastation right before his eyes. With that, everything tied to the Roznova family finally vanishes into thin air. Wow, that payback arc wrapped up super fast. The MC is an absolute beast. However, his terrible, burning thirst for battle had not been fully quenched just yet. Several powerful figures step up to stop him, accusing him of wiping out his own bloodline and targeting innocent people. They declare him the public enemy #1 of the entire continent and vow to bring him to justice. But Ferda survives yet again and reaches the 8th circle, the absolute peak a human can possibly achieve. Now it is time for total world domination. He becomes an archmage, fully aware that people still despise him and will look for payback themselves one day. To crush any potential threat, he decides to pursue the 9th circle, the legendary realm of a demigod. While doing his research, Ferda uncovers the final ingredient needed to reach that 9th circle. He is left completely stunned, realizing it feels like a twisted joke played by destiny itself. The ingredient he needs happens to be the heart of the Red Dragon, Archduchess Valdrova. Okay, now everything clicks into place. The Archduchess speaks about how incredibly ironic fate can truly be. She points out that the very person who was supposed to be her groom ended up coming all this way just to strike her down and finish everything. The MC starts coughing up blood and demands that the tyrant Valdrova meet her end by his hands once and for all. The dragon mentions she knows people call her a tyrant, but she asks why that is. She explains she has never even set foot in the human world and asks where all this deep-seated hatred is coming from. Ferda flies into a rage and asks if she honestly believes she did absolutely nothing wrong. He screams that her obsession with finding a groom was the exact reason he was cast out of his family. She asks if that is really her fault, and Ferda instantly fires back with a loud yes. He claims her greed for a human ruined his entire life. Man, things are looking so rough for me right now that I would gladly accept a giant dragon waifu at this point. Hearing the young mage's harsh words, she simply responds that she understands Ferda is caught off guard, trying to figure out what is going on based on her sudden reaction. He decides to push it aside. As the brief pause gave him just enough time to fully charge his mana, Ferda prepares to deliver the final strike while she whispers that she finally understands everything now. Suddenly, the massive red dragon's sharp claws move with lightning speed. Ferda panics and quickly activates a magical shield to try and defend against the incoming strike. However, a loud, piercing sound echoes through the entire battlefield. Blood splatters directly onto the young man's face, leaving him completely paralyzed in shock. Ferda stands frozen as he sees that the dragon has driven her own claws straight into her chest. He wonders why on earth she would harm herself in such a brutal, shocking manner. She asks if his magic truly requires the heart of a dragon to function. Realizing in absolute panic that she is trying to crush her own heart, Ferda screams at her to stop. She begins to tear her own chest open with her claws. The MC grows completely desperate seeing this, because that specific organ is Ferda's one and only shot at reaching the 9th circle. He quickly readies an incredibly powerful spell and lands a direct, heavy hit right on the dragon's head. The red dragon's massive body stumbles and begins to crash heavily onto the ground. Ferda panics as he sees her tightly clenched claws slowly starting to open up desperate. He questions what could have happened to her heart after that massive fall. Taking a much closer look, the young man spots the brilliant golden glow of an undamaged heart. Ferda breathes a huge sigh of relief upon realizing the heart is still completely in one piece. She tells him to go ahead and take the heart, leaving him totally baffled by her behavior. Ferda questions Valdrova on why she would go to such extreme lengths instead of just finishing him off. She answers that she did it because her very existence made his life completely miserable. Man, I am actually starting to feel really bad for her. Poor girl Valdrova begins to look back on her incredibly long and lonely journey through the world. She reveals that she absolutely loathed herself and the violent bloodlines pumping through her veins. She hated the uncontrollable urge to tear everything apart for no apparent reason at all. Valdrova utterly detested that destructive side of her that absolutely nobody could seem to stop. While in her human form, she would quietly observe the terrible aftermath caused by her own awful actions. The Archduchess laments that her mere existence was already more than enough to terrify everyone around her. She feels that her foolish dream of chasing happiness only brought immense suffering to so many people. The massive red dragon sheds a single, silent tear in her final remaining moments. She says she hopes he can find true happiness through her, noting it is the absolute last favor she can do for him. Valdrova's life force finally fades away entirely, leaving behind nothing but a glowing golden energy in the area. Holding the shimmering heart in his hands, Ferda feels a strange, confusing sensation stirring deep inside his chest. He questions why this monumental achievement is leaving such an incredibly bitter taste in his mouth. Highly annoyed, he accuses Valdrova of trying to mess with his head until her very last breath. He tries to pull himself together, reminding himself that the gateway to the 9th circle is standing right there in front of him. Finally, he raises the eternal heart high to absorb all of the dragon's legendary, immense power. Ferda thinks to himself that once he absorbs that power, his life will change completely for good. He believes he will finally be able to surpass the limits of all humanity, and thus be reborn as a true demigod possessing completely unmatched power. A massive explosion of brilliant golden light completely consumes his entire body at that exact instant. He suddenly finds himself floating around in a dark void in his spiritual form, leaving him totally confused. Ferda wonders what on earth is going on, considering he definitely consumed the dragon's heart. However, the sensation feels exactly like sinking into an absolute endless swamp. He questions whether this could be some sort of bizarre side effect from the heart itself. Out of nowhere, an overwhelming wave of unfamiliar emotions begins to hit him hard. A sudden, violent surge of raw energy strikes his mind out of the blue. Ferda realizes in absolute shock that these are actually Valdrova's own memories and deepest feelings. He is finally able to see the hidden truth buried deep behind the creature's past. It was a despair so incredibly ancient and profound that it made his own hardships look entirely trivial. He realizes that all the anger he fueled to bring her down was something far too small and insignificant. Seeing that his hatred amounted to absolutely nothing, he bursts into tears and asks himself what he has done. He questions what it was that he actually wanted with such fierce determination in the past. He catches a glimpse of his younger self as a little child, quietly drawing inside his bedroom. Ferda realizes he never truly wanted payback or to become some almighty, powerful demigod. His single childhood wish was simply to build a normal, loving, and supportive family. All the young man ever wanted was to be able to live a peaceful life alongside the people he cherished. He wonders if, deep down inside, Valdrova actually wished for the exact same thing he did. Well, it is too late now. He went and took out our ultimate waifu. Completely heartbroken, Ferda realizes that his entire pursuit of raw power and payback was entirely pointless. Now that she has fallen by his own hands, he feels like absolutely nothing makes sense anymore. Tears stream down his face as he stares blankly into the empty void of his choices. In that precise moment, he decides to cast the single, legendary spell of the 9th circle, Wish. Even though it seems like a total longshot, he activates the glowing golden circle around him, hoping against hope to undo the massive mess he made. Suddenly, he wakes up with a start upon hearing someone loudly calling his name. The young man looks around in complete confusion, wondering where on earth he is right now. His father, Arambalt Rosnova, complains that he is completely daydreaming while his father is speaking directly to him. He remembers that the man had passed away completely broken, and suddenly realizes he has traveled back in time. His father repeats that his engagement to Archduchess Valdrova has already been officially decided. Man, I am so hyped our waifu is officially back. The man reinforces that he is certain Ferda knows exactly what that means. He knows that if he turns down the engagement, he will end up getting kicked out of the family for good. Taking a firm step forward, Ferda confirms to himself that he really has returned to the past. He simply looks straight at his father and tells him that he fully understands the entire situation. Determined not to run away this time around, he announces that he will formally accept the engagement. Honestly, with how stunning that dragon waifu is, even I would marry her in a heartbeat. The second son, Hukin Rosnova, is completely shocked to hear that he actually agreed to the arrangement. Hukin asks the servant if he heard that correctly. Since he fully expected his brother to beg for his life, the servant explains that the young man dismissed all the staff and is currently staying all by himself in his quarters. Wearing a wicked smirk, Hukin decides to pay him a little visit just to mock his brother. Meanwhile, Ferda is inside his bedroom, calmly getting himself ready without a care in the world. Hukin forces the door open violently and asks why on earth he has not packed up and left yet. However, the older brother is left completely dumbfounded by what greets him. Hukin fully expected to find the young man crying his eyes out, but instead finds him dressed completely impeccably. Ferda calmly points out that his brother just barged into his private room without even knocking. First, Ferda mentions he dismissed the servants because he needs to get used to dressing himself on his own. Hukin bursts out laughing and asks if the young man truly grasps the massive gravity of accepting this engagement with an ice-cold demeanor. Ferda fires back that he knows it simply means getting dismissed from the household. Hukin tells him he is going to get wiped out and asks if he even knows why the spot for the groom was completely vacant. Glancing out of the corner of his eye, Ferda answers firmly that he is already well aware of everything in the previous timeline. Valdrova's very first groom was the Empire's third prince. He was considered an absolutely flawless man and even turned down the throne just to volunteer for the engagement. However, just a single day after arriving to meet the dragon for their engagement, the prince appeared to be incredibly thrilled and happy about that fateful meeting, but he ended up getting brutally and ruthlessly beaten to a pulp. Hukin asks if he honestly thinks he can survive an engagement that even the prince could not handle. This guy just does not get it. For her, it is totally worth it. He gives up trying to convince his brother, calling him an absolute fool, walking straight to his doom. The brother threatens him with severe consequences if he tries to run away and bring shame to the family name. Ferda stares back at him coldly and tells his brother to keep his wild impulses in check for once. He reveals that everyone already knows Hukin is constantly eyeing their older brother's wife. Hukin steps forward in a blind rage ready to strike, but Ferda calmly tells him that he will just have to hold back. The young man warns with a sarcastic smile that his face is far too valuable right now to be covered in bruises. He bids him a mocking farewell, stating that he will now begin his very long journey to the dragon's territory. A handkerchief is used to dry the tears of someone waving goodbye to him. The old butler weeps, saying it was an immense honor to serve him throughout all these years. On the inside, Ferda knows that is a total lie, since that very butler used to secretly poison his food in the past. As a kid, he always thought he was just naturally sickly, but later discovered the extreme betrayal of the servants. Remembering those dark, grim times gives him an intense urge to completely wring the old man's neck. Instead, in the present, he simply gives the butler a gentle pat on the shoulder and offers his thanks. Ferda remarks that taking care of someone like him for such a long time must not have been an easy task at all. He steps inside the carriage and asks them to take good care of the Rosnova family during his absence. Ferda reflects that since he already got his payback in his past life, his mind is now completely at peace. He watches the beautiful green scenery rolling past the window of the moving carriage. All of that lingering anger and insatiable desire for payback has finally vanished from his heart entirely. He recalls how the dark magic he relied on in the past used to act just like a highly addictive substance. It felt incredibly thrilling at first, but later turned into something absolutely impossible for him to control. It was like a toxic fog that slowly but surely chipped away at his own sanity. Whenever the madness completely took over his mind, everything seemed like pure, twisted fun to him. However, the young mage decides he has absolutely no desire to live that destructive way ever again. He realizes that experiencing true, genuine peace for the first time in ages feels absolutely wonderful. Just as he thinks about how he will not need to awaken as a mage again, the driver announces they have officially arrived. A wooden sign clearly warns that entering the Duke's territory is strictly forbidden. Ferda decides to step down from the carriage and sits right on top of his suitcase in the middle of the deep forest. The driver speeds off in a massive hurry, desperately wishing the young man stays safe and healthy. He enjoys not being constantly watched, but considers learning some basic defense magic just to survive out here. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind whips past out of nowhere, immediately catching Ferda's attention. He looks over in the direction of the bushes and quickly realizes someone is hiding out there. A young maid with striking white hair steps out and introduces herself as Ruri, Valdrova's servant. Whoever drops a like and leaves a comment is getting a maid like her sent as a gift. She asks if he is the young Ferda Roznova, and he calmly confirms his identity. Ruri lets him know she will be escorting him to the castle and points toward the path they need to take. Ferda recalls that despite the Empire's immense arrogance, their actual power was not nearly as flawless as they claimed. To the far east of the continent lay the Demon Lands, a place completely infested with terrifying monsters. However, it was the red dragon Valdrova who single-handedly blocked the creature's advance right on the front lines. He thinks it is incredibly unfair that people label Valdrova a demon dragon after everything she did to keep them safe. He notices ferocious wolves are quietly creeping closer through the shadows of the dark forest. He knows that in front of a dragon, those cowardly monsters would never have the nerve to strike. Noticing the young man's tension, the maid states in a cold tone that he has absolutely no reason to worry. She guarantees that the creatures will not attack as long as he stays close to her, and he thanks her. Ferda asks how much farther they have to walk, and she replies that it will take roughly 2 hours. She casually adds that if she were all by herself, taking flight would get her there in about 10 seconds flat. Ferda notes to himself that she is definitely no ordinary maid. Ruri is an elite dragon kindred, born with unbelievable raw strength and incredible magical abilities. Knowing this fact, the young man decides to use this information to his full advantage. He suggests they just fly over to the lair, but she fires back that she would have to carry him. Ferda says he can handle the flight, but she coldly states that she simply does not want to do it. The young man falls silent while continuing to shake from sheer exhaustion from all the walking. He suggests taking a quick break to rest, but she strictly orders him to keep moving forward. Ferda makes a face, realizing he will not be getting any rest anytime soon. The young man reflects that the path to marriage is definitely never an easy road to travel. Finally, they arrive at their destination, and the maid knocks heavily on the massive metal door. Ruri announces in a loud voice to her mistress that her groom has just arrived. Standing outside, Ferda feels an absolutely crushing pressure radiating from inside the room. She tells him to wait out there while she receives the message, but he suggests speaking to her directly. Ruri glares back at him with pure anger, stating that someone like him has absolutely no right to stand before her mistress. Shortly after, the maid returns with her hands neatly clasped to deliver the official message. The dragon's message praises the young man for traveling so far, despite knowing her terrifying reputation. However, Valdrova firmly states she has zero interest in an engagement forced upon her by the Empire. She orders Ferda to turn back home, leaving the young man deep in thought over the immediate rejection. He knows that in his past life, he would have gladly accepted the offer to pack up and leave right then and there, but things are completely different now, because being here is purely his own conscious choice. Ferda confidently announces that he will not back down and wishes to move forward with the engagement. Facing her silence, he asks if she is not going to deliver his final response to her mistress. She then pulls out a massive pouch filled with gold coins to offer him. She praises his fierce determination and offers him riches in case he cannot return to his home. The purpose of the gold is to give him a fair shot at building a brand new life somewhere else. The young man answers coldly that he has absolutely no interest in wealth or raw power. He raises his hand and states that the only thing he truly cares about, at this very moment, is fully honoring the engagement directly with her, Archduchess Valdrova. The maid lets out a deep sigh and closes her eyes, completely running out of patience. Ruri readies her fist and charges forward, throwing an extremely violent strike straight toward him. She angrily demands that he get out of there immediately so he stops wasting any more of her time. Ferda comments that the message was incredibly brief, but she snaps back that those specific words are coming straight from her. She begins to manifest her sharp dragon claws and horns, threatening him if he does not leave. A terrifying, eerie green aura flares up all around her as she undergoes a partial transformation. He recognizes that intimidating presence instantly and realizes it is the legendary dragon Fear. Ruri states she knows filthy mortals just like him, who only care about pure greed and status. Ferda understands that it was for that exact same reason of greed that the third prince ended up getting wiped out. The prince only wanted to marry her to exploit the situation and completely subdue Valdrova. He was an absolute shameless fool to think he could easily hide his obvious greed. She takes a step forward, re-emphasizing just how incredibly arrogant that man used to be. Ruri slams him down onto the ground with immense force and tells him that to her, Ferda is absolutely no different. She asks if he wants to meet the exact same tragic end as the prince for trying to play her. Even pinned flat against the ground, Ferda lets out a slight, confident smirk. He begins to give his word right then and there, ensuring there is absolutely no lie in his speech. Ferda explains that he was not forced by anyone to come all this way, nor is he looking for any profit. He remembers back to when she handed over her very own heart to a selfish man like his past self. He is completely determined to stand by her side this time as Valdrova's true, genuine groom. He demands that she speak directly to him from now on, without relying on any go-betweens. The maid grows extremely irritated by the young man's completely bold and insolent tone. Ruri completely loses her temper and strikes, asking how he dares to spout such absolute nonsense. Suddenly, Ruri halts her attack right in front of Ferda, who remains fallen on the ground. She asks to be excused for a brief moment, and Ferda simply nods along. Watching the servant walk away, Ruri heads back inside the lair to report everything the young man said outside to her mistress. She finishes relaying the exact details of how determined the young man is to be her groom. The maid displays immense respect for her mistress, who is one of the 12 absolute rulers. The Archduchess asks with great curiosity if the young man truly uttered all those words. Valdrova is left thoughtful by the young man's actions and admits she is curious to find out who he really is. Man, she is way too gorgeous. I would not hesitate for a split second to marry her. She asks what the young man looked like, and Ruri answers that he seemed like an extremely weak human. The servant even stretches the truth, claiming he looks awful and suggesting they kick him out, but her mistress quickly calls her out. Ruri apologizes and admits he is handsome, but her mistress clarifies that was not what she was asking about. Letting out a long, heavy sigh, the servant finally confesses that the young man is no ordinary human. She explains that because she is a dragon kindred, she easily terrifies any regular mortal, but she notes that Ferda showed absolutely no signs of fear. Even after she unleashed her terrifying aura, Ruri concludes that the young man might actually be fully capable of looking her mistress right in the eyes. Hearing that, the Archduchess lets out a soft, gentle laugh, seeming quite intrigued. Valdrova mentions that this is wonderful news, leaving her loyal servant rather surprised. She finds joy in the idea of meeting a human who can face her gaze directly. The dragon thinks to herself that they might finally be able to look at one another in a normal, peaceful way. Ruri is left slightly confused by her mistress's reaction to the idea of acting normally. The Archduchess confirms her desire, leaving the servant in a quiet, reflective silence. Back out in the hallway, Ruri announces that her mistress has decided to proceed with the engagement. She leads the young man through the massive castle, stating she will show him to the guest room. Ferda steps into the quarters and notices the place is far cleaner than he ever expected. When he asks who takes care of the cleaning, Ruri reveals it is her, noting she is the only servant there. She stresses that she is the sole employee and makes it a point to address him strictly as a guest. Ferda questions the choice of words, but she warns him he will only be a groom after the official ceremony. He compares her to a loyal guard dog and asks when exactly the engagement ceremony will take place. Ruri explains that the event will be kept incredibly simple and private right inside the lair. Ferda simply nods along with her answer, remaining completely calm under her highly suspicious gaze. The young man begins to reflect on the 1-month deadline he will have ahead of him until the big day. Ruri keeps staring him down with her arms tightly crossed, making absolutely no effort to hide her dislike for him. She warns that the deadline serves as a strict trial for him to successfully prove his actual worth. The servant states that the partner of a great dragon needs to stand on the exact same level as her. She points a finger straight at his chest, demanding that he prove he is truly qualified. Ferda lets out a silent sigh, realizing that married life is definitely not going to be a walk in the park either. He asks if this is her mistress's wish, but Ruri admits it is entirely her own executive decision. The servant explains that her mistress is far too naive and that she must step up and act with strict rules. She demands that he show his true, hidden potential, despite possessing such a frail body. Otherwise, he will never be accepted or recognized as the dragon's true partner. The young mage simply murmurs thoughtfully. Weighing the harsh terms laid out by the white-haired servant, Ferda notes to himself that his bride-to-be truly has incredibly loyal and good people by her side. He deeply admires the extreme loyalty of the servant, who puts her mistress's well-being above everything else. He wonders why such fiercely loyal people were not there with her during her final moments in the past. He accepts the challenge and sarcastically asks if he needs to go ahead and become the emperor himself. Ferda observes that, in reality, she is demanding he display a potential fully worthy of a great ruler. He flashes a calm, confident smile and says he perfectly understands the massive scale of that demand. Ruri gets irritated by the young man's attitude and asks why on earth he seems so completely relaxed. She questions if he thinks all of this is easy, but Ferda playfully denies it. He tells her not to worry and promises to prove his full array of skills within a month's time. The servant remains highly suspicious, trying to understand exactly where all that confidence is coming from. Night falls over Valdrova's majestic castle, while a gentle breeze blows softly under the light of a brilliant full moon. Ferda paces around his room, thinking about the demand to prove his potential, fully aware he currently possesses no active skills. He reminds himself that mages are incredibly rare across the continent, and that he is the only one with the experience of reaching the 9th circle. For any mage, the first circle is the absolute most critical, as it defines the flow and direction of all their mana circuits. The blue circle, achieved through calm meditation, is the most common choice since it offers a slow but incredibly stable path. On the flip side, the red circle is born from wild, turbulent emotions, making it easy to slip into madness, even though he became an archmage, relying purely on hatred. Ferda knows that if he takes the exact same path as before, he will gain power much faster, but it would bring terrible consequences. Because of that, he decides to choose a completely different route this time to ensure he will not waver in his future choices. A full week passes by at the castle, bringing a crisp, clear day under a bright blue sky. Ferda appears sitting flat on the floor of his room, completely focused during a deep meditation session. He pushes his absolute limits, channeling a glowing ball of bright blue energy right between his hands. Ferda lets out a discouraged breath as he realizes he has failed yet again to build up the energy. He reflects that forming a blue circle typically takes 3 long years, and even with his memories, the texture feels completely different from a red circle. Thinking to himself that he only has 3 weeks left on his deadline, he is suddenly interrupted by Ruri, who walks in asking if he is preparing. Ferda confirms he is getting ready, but the servant glances at his soup and thinks to herself that absolutely nothing has changed about his strength. The young man eats calmly and states that things will work out fine if he just keeps trying, leaving the girl completely silent. He secretly admits to himself that he really isn't making any progress and will need to find a completely different approach to succeed. Out of nowhere, a massive tremor begins to violently shake the entire room, catching both of them completely off guard. Ferda asks where that heavy vibration is coming from, and Ruri explains that her mistress is currently out hunting down monsters. Curious about the hunt, he learns from the servant that the Archduchess is personally clearing out the creatures emerging in the east. Ferda looks out the window thoughtfully, softly whispering Valdrova's name as the sound of distant explosions echoes from afar. The young man turns to the servant and expresses his strong desire to witness that battle with his very own eyes. Ruri strongly advises that it would be best if he stayed put, prompting Ferda to immediately ask for the reason behind the warning. The servant explains that a regular human mind could never possibly handle the absolute devastating sight of a dragon in full combat. She teases him, saying he might just end up shaking in his boots from sheer terror before the ceremony even happens if he insists on watching. Ferda slams his hand firmly on the table and completely rejects the idea of staying behind, showing fierce determination. He states it is the absolute duty of the person who will be her partner to witness that clash firsthand. Shortly after, Ruri unfolds her majestic white dragon wings and soars swiftly through the sky. Taking the young man along with her, Ferda's feet finally touch the grassy ground while Ruri lets him know in a dry tone that they have arrived at their destination. The young man drops straight to his knees on the floor, completely dizzy from the mind-boggling speed of a trip that felt exactly like teleportation. Feeling his stomach completely turn, he hears Ruri warn him that the person he is supposed to be looking at is definitely not her. The servant strictly commands him to stand right up and look straight ahead. As he stands at the very edge of the cliff, he spots a thick, dark purple mist rising up from deep within the valley. Ferda opens his eyes wide in pure shock as he feels the immense, heavy pressure radiating from that place. Right before them, a pack of colossal, serpent-like monsters writhes around in the middle of a dense, dark smoke. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light strikes the creatures, unleashing a powerful shockwave throughout the entire valley. A massive red dragon emerges right in the center of a devastating explosion of flames, completely dominating the entire battlefield. The gigantic serpents shrink back and let out high-pitched screeches, desperately trying to defend against the dragon's fierce wrath. With razor-sharp, relentless claws, the massive creature tears through the flesh of one of the monsters without an ounce of mercy. The red dragon opens her massive jaws wide, gathering an unbelievable amount of burning flame energy deep inside her throat. With her neck glowing intensely, the creature prepares to unleash the full extent of her destructive power. A massive pillar of fire is unleashed, completely incinerating absolutely everything in its path. In the blink of an eye, Ruri quickly positions herself right in front of Ferda to shield him from the fierce gale and extreme heat caused by the massive attack. The dragon unleashes a deafening roar that makes the entire region shake under the sheer force of its sound waves. The sound of that roar echoes through the entire valley, spreading an aura of absolute, pure terror everywhere. Ferda finds himself completely paralyzed and begins to break out in a cold sweat, facing that overwhelming display of raw power. He drops to his knees on the ground, completely unable to believe that his bride-to-be possesses such a mind-blowing level of strength. That was the true, terrifying dragon fear, a force fully capable of easily subduing any regular human mind. Ruri asks if he finally understands the extreme danger and the massive, uncrossable canyon that exists between them. She concludes by stating just how completely absurd it is for a mere human to dare dream of pairing up with such an incredibly superior being. Ruri points out that this giant, fierce beast is the true, authentic form of the creature who is supposed to become his partner. She repeats how entirely ridiculous she finds it for an ordinary human to dare try and form a lifelong bond with a dragon. The servant makes it a point to emphasize that this colossal being is exactly who will be standing right by his side. Ruri looks down with pure disdain at the young man's hand, which cannot stop shaking against the dirt floor out of absolute fear. She thinks to herself that the young man is trembling exactly as she predicted, and that was precisely why she tried to warn him earlier. The girl explains that inside a red dragon's veins lies what humans usually refer to as a deeply fierce nature. It is an existence that simply cannot live without tearing apart everything around it, driven by a fierce, wild instinct. She warns him that he will be caught in the middle of that crossfire on a daily basis and asks if he finally grasps the true weight of being a dragon's partner. Ruri reflects that humans and dragons will simply never mix, and that her mistress will soon realize this wish is completely impossible. However, to the servant's absolute astonishment, Ferda lets out a gentle smile and whispers that all of this is truly magnificent. She is left completely stunned to see that instead of utter terror, the young man is staring at the scene with pure, unadulterated awe. The servant steps back completely horrified, wondering to herself if this young noble is some sort of crazy glutton for punishment. Night returns once again to Valdrova's castle, bringing a calm, serene quiet down upon the massive fortress. Ferda appears lying down in his quarters, thinking to himself that even though he was prepared, the actual impact was far greater than he imagined. His entire body is completely beaten down and exhausted from taking the direct brunt of the dragon's fear and powerful roar. He remembers how he was brought back, dragged along, and escorted without a single shred of gentleness by the servant. He acknowledges it is a total miracle his mind is still in one piece, and that at this rate, he will end up wasting the day without progressing his circle. Ferda asks himself why on earth he felt such a powerful urge to go out and watch that dangerous battle in the first place. He begins to replay every single detail of that mind-boggling scene he witnessed back in the valley over and over in his head. Suddenly, the memory of that devastating roar echoes in his mind once more, causing his eyes to snap wide open instantly. Even though it was terrifying beyond absolute limits, he realizes that deep down, he wants to keep watching Valdrova's incredible strength. He reflects on how she hides her true form in the east, while tearing apart and crushing those dangerous beasts. All of that brutal destruction serves one single purpose: to protect the realm and the people she cares about so deeply. This is the heavy burden of a noble red warrior who chose to walk a path of constant hardship entirely by her own choice. Thinking about her immense sacrifice fills the young man's heart with a deep, genuine, and profound admiration. He whispers to himself that he wants to become someone truly worthy of standing right next to a person as magnificent as her. However, he is caught completely off guard by a sudden, intense burning sensation in his hand, and realizes he is on the verge of forming a red circle. Desperate, he tries to push away that angry energy, knowing full well he cannot repeat the exact same tragic mistakes from his past life. But as he looks deep into his spiritual sea, he notices something highly unusual happening with the gathering red energy. Valdrova's silhouette, dressed in her majestic armor, emerges glowing brightly before his highly focused mind. Ferda realizes that the energy surging right now is directly tied to his deepest feelings for the Archduchess. He notes that the more he thinks about her, the cleaner his circuits become, realizing this is definitely not fueled by anger or payback. Sitting in deep meditation, he tries to decipher this incredibly vague and peculiar emotion before it completely fades away. Filled with fierce determination, he focuses entirely on this brand new feeling, starting to tightly compress and spin the mana between his hands. The red energy begins to condense in an incredibly stable manner, shining with a warm, pure, and bright intensity. He channels the entire concentrated flow to manifest his very first magical circle. A flawless red circle emerges floating right above his palm, but this time around, its core essence is entirely different from before. Ferda presses his fist tightly against his chest, swearing to himself that a tragic future and old mistakes will never happen again. The very next morning, Ruri walks into the bedroom and nearly drops her tray in absolute shock upon seeing he advanced a level overnight. He praises her incredibly quick perception, while the servant demands to know how someone who was struggling yesterday managed to break through his circuit so fast. Ferda playfully teases her, saying he managed it because he is no ordinary person, and asks what she thinks of the final result. Ruri reluctantly admits that he met the requirements, but the young man notes he still has an incredibly long journey ahead of him. He sets his napkin aside with a serious look, already planning out the next crucial steps for his magical training. Ferda asks if there is any place nearby where he can freely practice and test out his magical abilities. The servant begins sweeping the floor at lightning speed, getting absolutely everything ready in the blink of an eye. Standing with a proud posture, she presents a training field fully stocked with several target dummies completely ready for use. Highly surprised, the young man applauds her incredible efficiency for putting together a whole training area in just half a day. Ruri asks what exactly he plans to practice using just simple targets, and he explains he will focus entirely on efficient mana control. Confused, she mentions that to dragons. Doing that sounds just as natural as having to practice taking a breath. Ferda comments that other dragon kindred would find that thought incredibly wild, but she simply reminds him that she belongs to that race too. Ferda just stares at her in silence, not quite knowing how to respond to such a casual and natural attitude from her. He wonders to himself how someone born with such a gift could ever understand human struggle, and invites the servant to watch if she wants to see the training. He focuses his mind in front of the targets, reflecting that the core foundation of mana control is absolute stability, which is the traditional style of the blue circle. However, the young man reminds himself that his current circle is red, which changes his entire approach to it. He needs to stir up his emotions while simultaneously keeping them perfectly under control to draw out the true, hidden power. He recalls that in the past, it took him a whole year just to extract this unstable mana, and another full year to successfully condense it. That entire mana projectile technique, which he learned with so much sweat and blood in his past life, needs to be perfectly replicated right now. Amazingly, using all of his accumulated experience, he manages to pull off the exact same feat in a mere 2 minutes. Ruri opens her eyes wide in complete shock upon seeing a flawless sphere of mana created with absolutely zero waste on his very first attempt. Ferda points ahead, keeping 3 spheres of crimson mana floating in a perfectly controlled manner. With a highly focused and calm gaze, the young mage gives the command to fire the energy straight at the targets. The red energy projectiles shoot forward like flashes of lightning, cutting through the air straight toward the training dummy. The heavy impact of the mana blast causes a massive explosion that completely obliterates the first wooden target. He flashes a satisfied smile, confirming that thankfully he has not lost his touch or precision with his magic. Ruri observes him in absolute pure silence, with a look that blends deep suspicion and total, utter shock. Later on, Ruri reports everything she witnessed back to Valdrova, who praises the servant's hard work and finds it impressive that he awakened so quickly. The Archduchess admits she does not know exactly how incredible this achievement is and asks the maid for her honest impression of the young man. Ruri states the young man has been absolutely flawless since day one, and because of that, he seems highly suspicious and dangerous, leaving her mistress curious. She argues that no regular human would act without making a single mistake, concluding he must be hiding something truly bizarre, like being a weird glutton for punishment. Valdrova smiles, seeing the servant acknowledge a human like that, and comments that the young man truly does seem quite surprising. The Archduchess tells her not to worry and states she will try to trust the pure intentions Ferda has shown so far. Ruri falls deep into thought, sadly remembering that her beloved mistress had been deeply hurt by other humans in the past. She swears to protect her mistress's newly opened heart and fiercely desires to uncover what that young man's true intentions really are, taking full advantage of the moment. The servant suggests to the Archduchess that perhaps it might be a great idea to assign that special task to her groom Valdrova questions, with great curiosity, exactly what the maid is referring to by suggesting that task. The announcement echoes through the grand hall, alerting absolutely everyone to the formal entry of Ferda Roznova into the noble meeting. At the Eastern Border Coalition Assembly, the lords whisper in surprise at the sudden, unexpected meeting called by the Archduchess. One of them complains about gathering while monsters could strike at any moment, but the other reveals the reason is the arrival of the Archduchess's groom. Astonished by the news of the engagement, they wonder who the absolute fool was that accepted the arrangement, only to discover it is the Roznovas' third son. The nobles openly mock the 18-year-old young man, calling him a total failure who does not even know how to hold a sword properly. The leading lord scoffs at the entire situation, arrogantly commenting that the young man probably will not last very long out here. Count Olvera claims with a sneer that the groom will almost certainly be torn to pieces by the Archduchess, and the others laugh along in agreement. The massive doors of the hall suddenly swing wide open, revealing Ferda's silhouette under the bright light pouring into the room. The young man steps forward with firm strides and a serene expression, closely accompanied by the loyal servant, Ruri. Just a little while earlier, while flipping through a book, the young man had questioned whether he truly needed to meet with the lords at this exact moment. Ruri explained it was an absolute necessary duty and asked if he knew why her mistress carried such a deeply feared and grand title across the empire. Ferda recalled the famous legend of the Black Dragon Godwin, whose life was ruthlessly taken by Valdrova herself. Ruri confirmed the tale and explained that the groom needs to manage the territory and handle the local lords on behalf of her mistress. In short, she detailed that the Archduchess takes care of all external threats, while the young man will be fully in charge of all internal politics. Suspecting this to be a test due to a lack of complete trust, Ferda accepted the challenge and agreed to go meet the nobles. Standing before all the lords, the young man introduces himself in a grand manner as the future partner of the region's Archduchess. With a sharp and direct look, he throws out a bold question, asking them exactly how they would prefer to be treated by him. The nobles swallow hard, instantly realizing that this young man is no pushover who can be easily intimidated or manipulated. Count Ulvera takes the floor with a sly grin, stating that everyone present is a lord, serving under the grand leadership of the Archduchess. He goes on to say it is only fair to show proper respect to her future consort, but leaves a clear tone of provocation hanging in the air. The Count points out in an intimidating manner that the nobles there swore their loyalty to the Empire long before the young man was even born. Therefore, the Count questions if it would not be far more fitting for the groom himself to show proper courtesy and respect to the veterans. Ferda hears the provocation and calmly inquires if that is their final answer on whether he should speak to them with respect or treat them as his inferiors. With a freezing and authoritative glare that completely silences the entire room, the young man demands the Count answer his question directly. Intimidated by the sudden pressure, the Count stammers and gives in, admitting the groom has every right to speak to them as their superior. Ferda clarifies that even becoming the consort will not change much, and that the nobles must manage their lands just like they always have. Whether by governing or standard operations, a brown-haired lord slams his hand on the table in outrage, asking if the young man is suggesting that they mistreat and exploit their own people with total composure. The young man raises his hand and offers a sarcastic apology, claiming it was merely a harmless slip of the tongue. The irritated lord snaps back venomously, stating that now he perfectly understands the exact reason why the young man was abandoned by his own family. The noble points at Ferda and insults him, saying a mere first circle mage should respect his betters, proudly highlighting that he himself is a fourth circle mage. Hearing the insult, Ferda simply murmurs to himself that the fourth circle is a reasonably decent enough level. The lord grows even more furious at the young man's dismissive comment and asks what on earth he just said. He gets deeply offended to have his elite strength downplayed like that, since across the Empire, fourth circle mages are always treated as massive authorities. Outraged at being insulted by someone from the first circle, the mage begins to channel his energy, fully prepared to teach the young man some proper manners. At that exact moment, Ferda makes a calm gesture with his hand and says he has a highly interesting proposal to make to the furious lord. He suggests they hold a duel right then and there, so the noble can personally test out the skills of a mere first circle mage. The scene shifts over to an arena, where the spectators whisper that the outcome of the duel is completely obvious, fully expecting the young man to finally learn his lesson. Ruri watches everything with her arms crossed, keeping a close eye on the situation while wondering if Ferda's opponent, named Thessalos, will go easy on him. Both opponents take up their positions right in the center of the arena, under the watchful eyes of all the present nobles. Ferda maintains an incredibly relaxed posture and calmly asks his adversary which specific spell he plans on using in the duel offended. Thessalos finds the question extremely rude and complains about him wanting his trump card revealed before the match even begins. The opponent flashes a smug smile and taunts him, saying he must be scared, letting him know he can still back out if he prefers. He shows off by loudly announcing to everyone that he will be using the fourth circle spell called Magic Blast to completely finish the young man. The spectators gasp upon hearing the name of the spell, knowing it is a formidable, highly destructive magic, and fearing for the young man's survival, Ferda remains completely unfazed and says he will also reveal his magic, warning that the only spell he knows how to use is Mana Shot. Thessalos laughs dismissively at the basic spell revealed, but Ferda states with absolute confidence that he does not believe he will lose the match. The young man makes a motion beckoning his opponent forward, calmly adding that he knows far more than he lets on, furious at the young man's sheer audacity. The fourth circle mage violently channels his mana to launch an attack. A massive magic circle begins to take shape right in front of Thessalos. Emitting an incredibly intense reddish glow, he roars, stating he is going to turn the young man to dust, while Ferda calmly analyzes his unstable mana, feeling a bit sorry that his rival also relies on a red circle. Without wasting a single second, Ferda's crimson manospheres are fired off at lightning speed straight toward his opponent. Thessalos opens his eyes wide in complete astonishment as he notices the highly unusual path of that lightning-fast counterattack. Ferda maintains a completely flawless posture and coldly declares that this match is already completely over. The attack strikes Thessalos' magic circle with surgical precision, right before he could finish casting his defensive barrier. The fourth circle mage is caught, entirely off guard by the heavy impact that completely shatters his entire spellcasting right in front of his face. Thessalos realizes with absolute horror that the young noble was not aiming the spell directly at his body. He understands in total terror that Ferda targeted and destroyed his invocation circle with pinpoint accuracy right before it could be completed. As he falls to his knees on the floor, the noble questions himself in absolute despair if this truly is the power level of a mere first circle. Breaking another mage's spell, right in the middle of casting, is a legendary technique that not even he, with all his experience, could ever pull off. Thessalos' hand shakes uncontrollably against the sandy floor of the combat arena. Completely drained and out of breath, the experienced mage remains down on his knees, trying to digest what just took place. Breaking out in a cold sweat and trembling, he incredulously whispers that he was defeated in such an overwhelming manner by a young beginner. Ferda slowly approaches with calm steps and directly asks if his opponent finally admits his defeat. Staring down at the ground with watery eyes, the defeated noble hesitates to answer, facing the immense weight of that humiliation. He swallows his own wounded pride and secretly admits deep down just how sincerely he wishes to become someone stronger. He bows down and loudly declares that he accepts his defeat, stating he would do absolutely anything to truly manage to evolve, hearing the foolish gossip from the nobles. Ruri coldly shuts them up by saying she will gouge out the eyes of anyone who cannot clearly see the groom's total victory. Thessalos kneels down right before Ferda, praising his immense genius and stating that the Eastern military power leaves him feeling much more secure now. The warrior mentions it is an absolute honor to meet the consort, while Ferda reacts thoughtfully upon remembering that the lord had been demoted from the imperial capital in the past. The young man asks if he truly came from the imperial capital and inquires what his full name is, hearing him respond that his name is Thessalos Walcher. Upon hearing the name Thessalos Walcher, Ferda finally remembers the exact identity of that man from his past life. He fixes a serious gaze onto the warrior and reveals that, in reality, the man had been his great helper in the past. The noble is left confused, asking when exactly they could have possibly met, but is quickly cut off by Ferda softly touching his forehead with his index finger. Without a split second of hesitation, the young mage whispers the command to fire a point-blank mana shot straight into his opponent. A pinpoint beam pierces right through the opponent's head in the blink of an eye, abruptly and brutally ending that man's life. The noble spectators in the stands fly into a complete panic over the sudden assault happening right before their eyes. Thessalos falls lifeless to the ground in a pool of blood, while Ferda stares down at him coldly, without showing a single shred of remorse. He thinks to himself that he could not leave him alive under any circumstances, because allowing it would only bring massive grief to his bride. Total silence and an ice-cold wind sweep across the massive arena, leaving the other lords trembling and frozen looking at the body. The nobles panic, whispering the young noble's name, completely unable to believe the sheer audacity of that young man. They are left utterly horrified by the fact that a mere boy just coldly executed a noble lord of the empire. They whisper among themselves that the duel had already concluded, and that this was clearly a cowardly attack on a lord. But despite all their outrage, not a single one of them possesses nearly enough courage to take a step forward and challenge the young mage. Ferda kicks the deceased body aside and dismissively asks why everyone is acting so incredibly tense over Thessalos' passing. The young man states that the man fully deserved his end, and that leaving him alive would only bring sadness to the Archduchess, leaving the Count totally confused. The Count inquires how on earth his passing would bring her sadness, considering it was the very first time the consort had ever met with the border lords. Ferda flashes a dark half-smile and explains that Grand Duchess Valdrova sincerely wishes for humans to live happily. He emphasizes that she is a merciful leader and that Thessalos ended up acting entirely against her wishes, deciding to go inspect the dead man's private quarters. The young man adds that this offense would take place in the future, leaving the nobles entirely incredulous facing such an absurd justification for an assault. The nobles mentally label him a complete madman, but Ferda warns them they do not need to worry, as he does not care what anyone else does. Shortly after, a carriage travels at high speed down a highly uneven, bumpy dirt road. Inside the vehicle, Ferda rests his head in his hands, feeling extremely sick and nauseous from the heavy rocking of the trip. The young man complains that his head is spinning and that he feels completely wiped out physically. He reflects that his mana was entirely drained by firing that single projectile against Thessalos Walcher back in the arena. He suffers through the terrible motion sickness of the route and longingly laments that the magical cars of the future have not been invented yet. Ruri mocks him sarcastically with applause, commenting that it was pure genius of him to eliminate her mistress's most loyal lord during their very first engagement meeting. Ferda asks if she is talking about Thessalos, and the servant confirms that despite appearances, he was indeed one of the most faithful nobles. Concerned about the political fallout, the young man inquires if the deceased noble was truly a man of complete integrity and honesty. Ruri explains that he was half honest and half corrupt, which on the eastern border already made him the absolute best, since the other lords are completely consumed by greed. The young man guarantees that the engagement will proceed without any issues because he possesses an absolute undeniable justification for taking out Thessalos. He rests his head to the side with a thoughtful look, carefully mapping out his next moves. He stares at a sealed bag sitting right beside them and reflects that if his memory serves him right, the proof will be at the deceased man's castle. The carriage approaches the majestic castle of the Walcher family under the golden light of a beautiful sunset. Upon entering, the old butler of the Walcher estate greets them with a respectful bow, welcoming the messengers of the Grand Duchess. The butler lets them know his master is currently away, but Ferda bluntly states that he is gone for good, completely shocking the servant. Without wasting any time, the young man throws the tied bag straight into the hands of the startled old man, who asks what on earth this is. Ruri points and coldly orders him to hang that package up in a highly visible spot right on the castle gates. The butler peeks inside the bag and shrinks back in absolute panic upon recognizing the severed head of his very own master. Meanwhile, Ferda and Ruri barge straight into Thessalos' personal quarters, which look exactly like a luxurious suite. Ruri mentions he had better find concrete proof of corruption, and Ferda jokingly reminds her that she herself helped him handle the body. She threatens to go retrieve it to call off the engagement entirely, but Ferda cuts her off as he discovers a hidden trapdoor right under the bed. He feels around the wooden floor, searching for some sort of hidden mechanism or button to open up the secret passage. Ruri approaches impatiently and authoritatively commands the young man to step away from the spot immediately, with a highly focused and serious look. The servant clenches her fist and prepares to use her mind-boggling physical strength. She delivers a monstrous punch that completely obliterates the wooden flooring, blasting a massive hole right in the ground. As the dust settles down, the girl casually lets him know the way is open and they can go ahead and head inside. The two begin to head down with firm steps across the dark stone stairways leading deep into the castle's basement. They cover their noses due to the incredibly strong, nauseating smell of foul blood that completely fills the air of that cellar. Reaching the very bottom, they find themselves staring at a secret laboratory filled with the scattered remains of humans and monsters. That place was the hidden den of a Demon King follower, revealing that Thessalos was secretly operating as a highly dangerous necromancer. Ferda examines one of the bodies hanging from the chains and realizes he was fusing fallen soldiers with monster organs. Ruri stares at the scene completely shocked and concludes with deep hatred that this absolute psychopath was truly begging for his end. She laments that humans simply cannot be trusted and agrees that his extreme heresy fully justifies taking down a nobleman. Curious about the exact precision of his information, the servant asks the young man how on earth he knew about this secret lab. Ferda temporarily ignores the question as he focuses his gaze on a highly important document he just spotted among the papers in the room. The document reveals Thessalos' nameless masterpiece, detailing a method for the infinite cultivation of mana. The young man remembers back to when Thessalos showed him that exact research, explaining that monsters generate mana endlessly. However, the deceased used to emphasize that it was a highly volatile and impure energy, completely impossible to use for any proper spell. He theorized that if he could perfectly replicate the mana-generating capacity of those harmful creatures and manage to continuously extract pure mana, it would create an endless source of magic capable of breaking past all circle limits. Back then, Thessalos had confessed he would use an army of the undead to completely crush the nobles who banished him to that hostile territory. While the necromancer celebrated that he would soon become an archmage, Ferda was quietly creeping up right behind him. Ferda had calmly commented that the research would be incredibly useful for his very own personal payback. After finishing him off, the young man offered his thanks, knowing that specific cultivation method would make him reach the 9th circle faster than anything else. With this study in his possession, he would achieve the 8th circle much quicker, but the circumstances are completely different this time around. Ruri comments that seeing him eye that study proves he really is just an ordinary human, adding that nobody would ever know if he stole the research. The servant sarcastically remarks that it is a massive opportunity to get stronger that any human would dream of, offering him her congratulations. Ferda simply extends the papers right out toward her and states he will do no such thing, completely refusing to steal the technique. With a firm, resolved gaze, the young man orders the servant to completely destroy everything present inside that grim laboratory. Ruri asks, completely stunned if he is actually being serious, questioning if he truly considers himself a mage by not craving that knowledge. He admits the research could completely revolutionize the world of magic, but questions what the actual point of owning something like that would be. Ferda prefers to rip out the evil by its roots, rather than let himself be lured by the greed of a power that would only bring suffering to his bride. Looking straight at the white-haired servant, he calmly asks if she could go ahead and burn everything down for him. Ruri stares back at him in silence for a brief second and replies that fulfilling this request will be no trouble at all for her. She summons brilliant blue flames that quickly begin to consume the documents containing the dark research. Ferda watches the fire and reflects that absolutely every piece of magic carries the true emotions and feelings of the person casting it. He ponders that a mage's core essence is deeply affected by their own magic, just like Thessalos's hatred ended up completely consuming his mind and soul. Thessalos also possessed a red circle, fueled by an inferiority complex and a hatred just as massive as the one Ferda himself carried in the past. If he inherited his magic, Ferda would be completely consumed by uncontrollable emotions all over again, fully justifying his desire to discard it all. He sadly looks back on his past life, where he could only manage to survive by forcing himself to constantly feel a toxic, unhealthy hatred. Seeing Thessalos's research crumble into ashes, the young man lets out a soft, calm smile, commenting that the fire burns incredibly well. Ruri stares at him, thinking he is a highly unpredictable and bizarre glutton for punishment, a highly uncomfortable human to have around, but she begins to change her mind. She lets out a sigh and seriously suggests they get out of that damp, dark, and extremely musty environment as soon as possible. She mentions it would be highly improper to smell like battle right before the ceremony, making the young man realize that the big engagement day has finally arrived. If you want to see the next part, drop a like and leave a comment.